Studying energy and the interaction of matter and energy is an important part of any branch of science. In biology, we want to be able to examine the flow of energy through ecosystems. So today, we will learn how to explain how energy flows through ecosystems, explain how ecological pyramids help analyze energy flow through trophic levels. Where do you get the energy you need? Well, you get the energy you need from food. And that food got its energy either from its food or from the sun, depending on what kind of food you're eating. Remember, no organisms can ever make energy. Where do cows and chickens get the energy they need? Well, cows and chickens get their energy from grass and grains that they eat. And where does the grass get its energy from? Grass gets its energy from the sun. So ultimately, all of our food got its energy from the sun. What is the source of energy for algae? Well, algae is photosynthetic, so it gets its energy from the sun. Organisms that use light energy to make food are called photosynthetic organisms, and organisms that use light or chemical energy to make food are called primary producers. A food chain is a diagram, it's a model showing how energy is transferred from one organism to another. Food chains can be a little too simple to explain how energy actually flows through an ecosystem, and that's why we use food webs. A food web is a network of feeding interactions through which both energy and matter move. Energy flows through an ecosystem in a one-way stream, from primary producers to various consumers. That's what we can represent on a food chain, the direction that the energy flows. A food chain is a series of steps in which organisms transfer energy by eating and being eaten. Food chains can vary in length. For example, in a prairie ecosystem, an herbivore, such as a grazing antelope, feeds on a primary producer, such as grass. A carnivore, such as a coyote, in turn feeds on the antelope. In this simple food chain, the carnivore is only 2 steps removed from the primary producer. On this longer food chain shown on the slide, the top carnivore, the eagle, is 4 steps removed from the primary producer. In most ecosystems, feeding relationships are much more complicated than those described in a simple chain. One reason for this is that many animals eat more than one kind of food and are eaten by more than one type of consumer. A food web is made up of many interconnected food chains. Here we see one food chain. It goes from algae to flagfish to largemouth bass to anhinga to alligator. Trace different pathways from the algae to the alligator. You could go from the algae to the flagfish to the largemouth bass to the anhinga to the alligator, or you could go some other way. You could go from the algae to the grass shrimp, to the killfish, to the pig frog, to the alligator. There are many different food chains that all lead from the primary producers up to the top consumer, who we can refer to as the apex predator, or in this case, in the pathway shown, we go from primary producer to 1, 2, 3, 4 levels of what primary producers are shown in this web. Well, in addition to the algae, we also have plants, leaves, seeds, and fruits, because we have organisms that get their food from the water, and we have organisms that get food from the land. What can you infer about vultures from this food web? Notice that everything points up to the vultures. Well, what you can infer, and you don't even really have to infer it if you look at the color coding, is that the vulture, as a scavenger, consumes animals after they die. That's what scavengers do. This is a highly simplified representation of this food web. It looks complicated, but it's really very simplified compared to reality. Food chains and food webs are both types of models. A food chain is even simpler. Many species have been left out. Modeling is one of 3 methods used in ecological studies. Why do you think scientists studying feeding relationships using a model, why do you think they might use a model such as a food chain or a food web? Feeding relationships may be difficult to observe, and it may be unethical to experiment with them directly. What type of predictions could be made using a food chain or food web? Well, a food web could be used to predict what would happen if a certain population in an ecosystem increased or decreased in size.